Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video, I'll show you how I made the bases for Cursed City. Here's the base we're going to make today in this video, and I took inspiration from one of the tiles from the Cursed City set. So I got a picture online, and I'm looking at the kind of image here, the tile at the bottom right, and that's kind of what I'm going to look to be making and taking my colours from. And in this video I'll be using Milliput for the first time, and then also some layer paints, some contrast paints, Vallejo paints, the Citadel skull pack, some Gorilla Glue, some Coarse Flocking, some fine sand, a little bit of foil, like strong foil, and then finally we're going to make this on a 40mm base. And here's our 40mm base, but we've got this slot in here, and so I'm going to take some of this foil, like a pie kind of foil. I'm just going to cut it out so that it covers that little slot, and then anything we make on the top won't fall through. I'm just going to stick it on with a little bit of Gorilla Glue, so pop that on there, and then I stick the little bit of foil on, and then I'm just going to take a little toothpick and just roll that on to really get it nice and flat and push it in. And here's the Milliput, and this is £2.85 I picked this up for, so pretty cheap. And it's a versatile epoxy putty, highly adhesive, so you don't have to glue this on, it just sticks to itself. And you have to mix them together for at least 5 minutes, and it says on the box it takes 3 to 4 hours to fully cure. And it's just like green stuff, I suppose, but I don't know what the difference is yet, because I've not used either of them. So I'm taking equal quantities of each, and just making sure I get the balance right. I'm not being like weighing it or anything like that, just doing it by eye, and that's going to be about right. And then I make sure that that's wrapped up really tight, because it's got to be like sealed nicely. And I start kneading that together and just do it for 5 minutes. I've got a podcast on, so I'm listening to that as I go and just mixing it all together until there's no streaks and that's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to get a ball of that, roll it so it's into a nice smooth ball with no cracks, and then I'm just going to work it with my fingers into like a little pancake shaped little disc, and I'm going to push that onto the base. And I just used a Sharpie as a little rolling pin. I don't have any tools for this, so I'm just having to make do with what I've got, and then using my finger to spread it over and try and get rid of those finger marks. And then I just trim off the excess with a knife. And it's really sticky, this, so you have to be quite like careful not to get it, because it doesn't stick to your fingers and come off. And I find if you just wet your fingers a little bit, that helps. I'm being pretty gross. I didn't have any water, and I didn't know how long it would take, so I just licked my finger and did that. So pretty grim, but it did the job. But I would say get a little pot of water maybe. And I've got too much on there once I've spread it out, so I'm just going to trim that down and get rid of that excess piece. And then I'm going to take my little cocktail stick and start working this. Ideally you want some kind of silicone crafting tool or sculpting tool, and that'd be perfect. But we've got to use what we have, and so I've got some little cocktail sticks, and that's going to work nicely. So just pop it in all the little grooves now, and I'm going to mark out all the bricks. And I'm making this quite wide, but we can close these gaps if they're too big just by smoothing it down, so that's no problem. And I noticed the bricks on the Cursed City tile aren't laid as you would see like on a wall. Sometimes the lines kind of go along 2 or 3 of the bricks rather than overlapping each other, if that makes sense. So I've kind of taken that into account and done that here as well. And so once I've got that all marked out, then I'm just taking my time to really get these lines nice and crisp, and I'm kind of pushing that tip of that cocktail stick in, dragging it along. And I just wet the end of the cocktail stick as well, just so it wouldn't stick. And then with the rolling pin again, just gave it a little roll, just to flatten it a little bit, and kind of close those gaps just a touch. And then I keep going back and forth now. I'm going over and over it until I'm really happy that it's nice and crisp, and that I haven't gone over any of the tiles with the end of that cocktail stick. And then there we go, that's what we're looking at. And so here I thought maybe I'll just go in with a little blade and just put some little nicks on the stones just to rough them up a little bit, as if they've been chipped on the edges. So I'm putting some tiny little lines, just like pressing it in rather than cutting, just pushing it in. And you've got lots of time. I mean, it's 3 to 4 hours for this to cure, so you've got ages to work this. And then I got some foil, rolled that into a ball, and I wanted to see what would happen if I rolled that over, much like you would with the kind of polystyrene or foam when you do crafting. And I found that this was unnecessary, really. It almost made too many dents, and I think for the size we don't really need to do that. So I just went over and smoothed it out a little bit. You can see there it's very bumpy, too bumpy. So I just wet my finger again and then just smoothed those bumps out. It may have added a little bit of texture, but I don't think you need to do that stage. Now I found this is too many floor tiles, so I'm just cutting off some excess so I get a nice balance of kind of dirt and stones to the tiles. And so I'm cutting a little bit of that off, and then I'm going to go back in and just work those cracks again and make sure it's nice and neat. And then I've got a skull, and I just, from the Citadel skull pack, I just trimmed a little bit off and then glued that on with super glue. And then once I did that, I got some Gorilla wood glue, put a little bit onto a plastic tray, and then I grabbed the good old cocktail stick again, and now I'm spreading this on really generously. I'm putting quite a bit on. When it dries, it tends to shrink a lot, so it's going to shrink a lot. But I want a lot on there because I really want the grit and the sand to bed down. So I'm giving that a good coat, being careful not to get it on the skull because we don't want too much sand sticking to that. And then once that's done, just rub my finger along the side and clean it up. And then I've got this really coarse flocking, all different types, and I'm sprinkling that on, and this is just going to resemble little bits of chipped tiles, rocks and stones in amongst the dirt. And I'm just using my cocktail stick to spread them out, and so they look nice and even. Then I've got this budgie sand, great stuff from a pet shop, super cheap, really fine, and I'm just sprinkling that all over. And I'm not worried about it going over the tiles because that's going to help almost give like a grouting effect. So I just let that set for a few seconds, and that's going to soak into that glue. And then I just use a blade to help me pick it up, and then I'm going to tip that back in, give it a little flick, tap it off, and then I also run a little bit of the sand just into those gaps to give us like some grouting. And then clean off the rim again, just wipe it with your finger or thumb or a little cloth and just make sure that's nice and clean. We don't want it sticking there because that's more work for us to do later. And there we go, I've left that overnight now, and that's solid. I've given it a good flick here, and you can see it's really tough. It makes a little tap tap sound. And then I'm going to put some Abbaddon black base paint all over this and just cover it completely. Give it a nice coat, a little bit of water to wet it down so it runs in the cracks, and make sure it's spread all over. Then once that's completely dried, I took some Ushabti Bone, and I've got my very vegan makeup brush, super fine, soft bristles. Take a little bit of paint, not too much, about that much, and then I like to use a little bit of card just to work that paint into the bristles, and this helps to really dry it out. And then just to be sure, I use a kitchen towel or paper towel just to work off as much paint as I can. Little test on my hand just to check that there's not too much paint on there, and then I'm going to start going in nice even strokes all over this. I don't want this to go in the grouting, I just want it to go on the raised areas of the stones, so I'm being quite careful and gentle at first, and then when I'm happy with how much paint's on the brush and how it's looking, I just keep going a bit rougher then and a bit faster, and then giving it a nice coat. And I end up doing this maybe 3 or 4 times until I'm happy with the depth of colour there. And so keep going, keep flicking it, add a bit more paint to the brush, go through the same thing, do that 3 or 4 times, and then you'll get a nice Ushabti Bone colour. So going again, you can see this is starting to build up now. And then as we add it on, this is going to give us the colour we need for the base. So that's what we're looking for. You can still see the black coming through, but we've got a nice base colour there. And now I'm going to go with some Sky Grey 0.989 from Vallejo. I've got a smaller brush now. It's a lot smaller than the makeup brush, but nice fine soft bristles. And then do the same thing, working on the card. But now I'm just going for mostly the edges and the kind of edges of the tiles. Don't want to go too much of this over the top because I want that Ushabti Bone to still come through. And there you go, you can see now we got some grey and Ushabti Bone, and finally I'm going to take some white, and I wouldn't normally use white to highlight, but we're going to cover it with some contrast paint, and so that's going to allow it to come through. You could almost think of this as a kind of zenithal, I suppose, a zenithal prime in a way, but we do want the colours to come through, not just the tones. So there we go, I'm putting this on, going all around the edge with the white, and then that's going to give us that real nice highlight, and that's what we're looking for, and that dries really quickly. I mean, it's a dry brush, I guess, so it dries really fast. But now I'm going to take Contrast Gryph Grey, and this is going to give us that spooky kind of blue colour, and so I'm going to give this one coat, not too heavy, just a kind of thin coat, almost like a little glaze all over it, and then we're going to cover not just the tiles, but that earth, the stones as well. And the only thing I'm not going to cover is the skull, so I'm being careful to work around that. And then I'm adding a little bit extra paint just in the grouting areas and where the tiles meet the dirt. And now I'm taking some Contrast Skeleton Horde, going quite generous here, and I'm putting that on the skull, making sure to get loads in the eye sockets and the teeth, and then just working it around. Where it meets the earth, I don't mind if a little bit goes there, because that'll blend in and that'll work nicely. And so that once the skull's done, I'm just taking little blobs of this and just going over the most raised areas. So that's where the highlight from that white would have hit. And so I'm just giving that a little coat over there and just touching up the skull again at the back. Now it's time for some contrast snakebite leather, and this I'm just dotting this around the earth now. So I'm trying not to get any on the big stones. I'm trying to give a little bit of an earthy colour. I don't want it to be like mud, and I want it to blend in with the blue. So I'm doing this while that grey Gryph Charger grey is still wet. So we're almost wet blending these, and that's going to give us a nice smooth effect at the end. And now finally I'm going to take some technical paint, some NURGLES ROT. This is great, and this is going to give us that kind of mildew, almost mould effect that we can see on the Cursed City tile. And then I'm just going to work that in some cracks and just on the edges of some of the tiles. And I'm just kind of going where I think this looks nice. And I'm just trying to give it a nice balance over. And so once I put it in these two main places, then I kind of step back a little bit and just see where I think some more green is needed. So a little bit up the top there. We need to balance it just on the edge. And so we're at this stage now. We need a little bit more on the edges because there's too much green in the centre. So I'm just putting some little dots, continuing that line along, and then we'll get this all balanced and looking really cool with that NURGLES ROT. Great paint this. And I've just put a little bit around the base of the skull as well. I didn't put much on the earth here, just where the tiles met the earth a little bit, but around the skull I thought it'd be good. Right, now we're going for some dark Prussian blue, some black and some sky grey, all from Vallejo. And you can use any kind of dark blue, it doesn't really matter. And I've done equal quantities of each, mixed it together, and we'll get this nice dark grey blue. And then I'm going to take some blue tack, pop that on the end of my brush, and then I stick the bottom of the base to that, and then that's going to act as a nice little turntable to make it really easy to paint the rim. And this is the final touch now, so we're just taking that nice paint, and these are great colours. It'll dry a bit darker than you see here, and so give that a nice even thick coat all over. You can do 2 if you want, if you think you need it, but I find with the Vallejo 1 does the job. And then that's going to finish our base off really nicely. And here it is, all finished, and I'm really happy with the end result. That NURGLES ROT, I think, worked really well. I can't wait to get my Cursed City set and try out the miniatures and see what they look like against this design. And if I'm happy with it, I might do this for the heroes. I don't imagine I'll do this for all the minis. That'll take for ages. So I think this will be good for the heroes for sure. For now, I just tested it out on this little bear that I made out of some of the milliput that was left over. I'll put links to everything used in the video in the description below, and there'll be affiliate links, but it won't cost you anything extra. In fact, the links to Element Games will save you up to 20% on everything you buy there. Every sale made through an affiliate link, I get a small commission. That's going to help me do loads more videos like this. So thanks so much for that support. I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page. And thanks to everyone who's joined so far. It's really awesome. We hang out on Discord, talk about the hobby, share ideas and help each other out. And you'll get some perks there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link in the description and it'll be great to see you there. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was great fun using that milliput, and I can't wait to do a lot more with it. Also try out some green stuff at some stage. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love reading your comments, and it's great to hear your feedback too. So thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.